before the blood was spilled. No one in the village knew his real name. They called him simply the young man. He did not arrive like a warrior, nor like a merchant, nor like a man seeking fortune. He came as someone who wanted to disappear. No horse, no banner, no visible weapon. Just worn boots, dark simple clothes, and a gaze that carried far more silence than his age should have allowed. The village lay near the remains of an old trade road. Once, wagons had passed through daily, carrying grain, iron, and rumors from distant lands. Now the stones of the road were half swallowed by earth, and the wind was its only traveler. Time had moved on. The village had not. The young man did not announce himself. He did not explain why he stayed. And no one asked. People here had learned a long time ago that questions were dangerous things. He took shelter in an abandoned house at the edge of the forest. The roof leaked. The door groaned like an old warning every time it opened. The villagers said the house once belonged to a widow who died during a hard winter. Some claimed cold killed her. Others believed loneliness did. The young man repaired the house with his own hands. Slowly, carefully, as if time itself was something he could afford to waste. During the day, he worked alongside the villagers, mending fences, carrying water, harvesting grain. He accepted payment without complaint and never argued over coin. At night, he remained awake. Sometimes a faint candlelight could be seen through his window long after the village had fallen silent. Other nights, people noticed that the house stood dark and empty, its door slightly open, as if he had gone somewhere no one followed. Toward the forest. No one knew why. The village had a leader. His name was Gerdal. Gerdal smiled often, but only when others were watching. His voice was calm, almost gentle, and his words always sounded reasonable. Yet every important decision in the village passed through his hands, and every difficult consequence somehow landed on someone else. Taxes were no longer paid to the crown directly. They were collected by men who claimed to speak for the crown. Sometimes they wore armor. Sometimes they simply carried swords and confidence. Gerdal always found a way to satisfy them. If that meant someone vanished, so be it. The young man noticed things others pretended not to see. One night, he watched from the shadows as men loyal to Gerdal entered the miller's home. There were no shouts. No struggle loud enough to wake the village. By morning, the miller was gone. His wife said he had left for work elsewhere. Her eyes told a different story. The young man said nothing. He remembered. An old man approached him one evening as the sun sank behind the trees. His back was bent, his hands scarred by decades of labor. His name was Marek, the oldest man in the village. Marek studied the young man for a long moment before speaking. "You were not born here," he said. "I live here," the young man replied. Marek shook his head slowly. "No. You are not living. You are waiting." The young man looked at him sharply. "Everyone waits," Marek continued. "But not for the same things. Most here wait for a good harvest or a quick death. You wait for something else." "What do you think I'm waiting for?" the young man asked. Marek's mouth curved into a tired smile. "Justice. Or revenge. Sometimes they look the same." That night, the young man returned to the forest. He stopped before an ancient stone, half buried in the soil, its carvings nearly erased by time. He knelt and loosened the rope tied around his waist. From beneath his tunic, he pulled out a broken object wrapped in cloth, a shattered medallion. Its surface was darkened, scarred, and stained by something that had once been blood. The symbol engraved upon it was no longer complete, but it had once meant loyalty, oath, and command. He closed his hand around it. "Not yet," he whispered, "but I remember everything." The forest answered only with wind. In the village, no one yet understood who the young man truly was. They did not know why he avoided questions. They did not know why he watched more than he spoke. They did not know why he never drank with others, or laughed, or spoke of family. They believed he was harmless. That mistake would cost them dearly, because some men do not come to villages to start new lives. Some come to finish old ones. And when the past finally rises, it does not knock. It breaks the door. The trouble did not begin with blood. It began with words. Words spoken quietly. Words whispered at the right moment. Words that sounded harmless until they settled in the wrong ears. It started with grain. One morning, Gerdal announced that several sacks from the communal storehouse were missing. Not ruined. Not misplaced. Stolen. The news spread through the village like a slow sickness. Hunger was never far away here, and stolen grain meant winter arriving early in people's minds. Gerdal did not accuse anyone directly. He never did. He simply stood in the center of the village, hands folded, voice calm. "Someone among us has betrayed the rest," he said. "We must be careful. We must be watchful." Eyes began to move. Whispers followed. By evening, the whispers had found their direction. The young man. He lived alone. He came from nowhere. He walked into the forest at night. He spoke little and watched much. Suspicion fits easily where knowledge is absent. The young man felt the change before anyone confronted him. Conversations stopped when he approached. Doors closed more quickly. Children were pulled away by their mothers. He said nothing. That night, 2 men came to his house. They did not knock. They did not break in either. They stood outside, clearing their throats, pretending they were there for honest reasons. One of them was Hal, a broad-shouldered farmer with a nervous temper. The other was Isaac, a thin man who had learned long ago that obedience kept him fed. "Gerdal wants to speak with you," Hal said. The young man nodded, as if he had expected this. Inside Gerdal's house, the air smelled of oil and old wood. Gerdal sat at the table, hands open, expression almost regretful. "People are afraid," he said. "You understand that, I'm sure." "Fear needs a reason," the young man replied. Gerdal smiled. "Yes, and sometimes it finds one." He spoke of the grain, of responsibility, of trust. He never accused. He simply explained how dangerous uncertainty could be. "You walk the forest at night," Gerdal added casually. "Some say they've seen you near the storehouse." "That is not true," the young man said. Gerdal leaned back. "Truth is fragile. Hunger is not." The meeting ended without chains, without threats. The young man returned home knowing exactly what would come next. The accusation came 3 days later. The missing grain was found near the forest path, half buried, close enough to the young man's house to make denial sound foolish. Gerdal gathered the villagers again. This time, his voice was heavier. "We cannot allow theft among us," he said. "If we do, we all starve." The crowd shifted. Some avoided looking at the young man. Others stared too hard, as if courage might appear if they looked long enough. Marek stepped forward. "There is no proof," the old man said. "Only fear." Gerdal nodded sadly. "Fear is proof enough when winter is near." The decision was made before anyone spoke it aloud. Exile. Not death. Not yet. Exile into the forest, beyond the old road, where bandits and wolves ruled equally. A sentence meant to kill slowly, without blood on anyone's hands. The young man did not argue. He looked at the villagers one by one. Faces he had helped. Hands he had worked beside. Eyes that now refused to meet his. Then he spoke. "You will remember this day," he said quietly, "even if you try not to." No one answered. They escorted him to the forest's edge at dawn. No food. No weapon. No merci. As he stepped beyond the trees, the village breathed again, convinced the problem had been solved. They were wrong. Deep in the forest, the young man stopped. He stood still for a long time, listening. Then he reached beneath his tunic and removed the broken medallion once more. "This was the first lie," he said to no one. And lies always demand payment. For the first time since arriving at the village, he allowed anger to surface. Not loud, not wild, cold, focused. He turned and disappeared into the trees. And far behind him, in the safety of their homes, the villagers slept. They did not know that exile was a mistake. They did not know that the forest remembered him. They did not know that the man they had cast out had survived worse than hunger. The debt had been acknowledged. Soon, it would be collected. The forest closed behind him the moment he crossed the line of trees. Not with sound, with understanding. The young man moved deeper, letting the village vanish from sight. Each step carried him farther from false safety and closer to something older, something honest. The air was damp, heavy with moss and decaying leaves. Every breath reminded him that this place did not forgive weakness. Hunger came quickly. He welcomed it. Hunger sharpened memory. By nightfall, he reached a narrow ravine hidden between two ridges. He knelt, brushed aside soil and roots, and uncovered what had waited for him all along. A wrapped blade, a small leather pouch with dried food, and a second fragment of the same broken medallion. He sat for a long time, saying nothing, listening to the forest breathe around him. When he joined the medallion pieces together, the symbol was still incomplete, but closer to whole than it had been in years. The past returned, not as images, but as weight. Orders given in quiet rooms. Men who trusted those orders. A command that sounded lawful. A fire that followed. He opened his eyes. "I survived," he said softly. "You did not." That night, he did not sleep. At dawn, he began to move again. Not away from the village, but around it. He observed from distance and shadow. Who stood watch? Who drank to forget? Who followed orders because obedience felt safer than thought? The forest showed him paths no one else remembered. On the third night, the forest took its first payment. Isaac was found at sunrise, hanging from a tree near the old road. No wounds marked his body. Only a wooden token rested against his chest, the symbol of the broken medallion carved into it. The message was simple. The forest had not forgotten, and neither had the man it protected. Fear entered the village before dawn. It slipped through doors, settled in corners, and waited. When Isaac's body was discovered, no one screamed. No one cried out. Silence spread faster than panic, because silence meant understanding. This was not chance. Gerdal arrived shortly after sunrise. He stood over the body, his face rigid, his eyes fixed on the wooden token. For a moment, the mask almost fell. Almost. "Bandits," he said finally. "They leave signs to frighten us." No one argued. No one believed him either. The token was burned by noon, but the image of it remained carved into memory. Men avoided the forest paths. Women pulled children close. Even the wind seemed louder than before. That evening, Gerdal ordered watches doubled. He chose men who owed him favors, men who knew too much to refuse. Hal was placed at the eastern edge of the village, where the road narrowed and shadows gathered early. Hal did not sleep that night. At the forest's edge, Marek waited alone. He did not carry a weapon. He did not call out. He simply stood where the trees thinned, leaning on his staff as if he were waiting for someone he already knew would come. The young man emerged without sound. "You should not be here," he said. "I lived long enough to know when lies begin to collapse," Marek replied. "This village survives by forgetting, but forgetting has a cost." The young man said nothing. "They will call you a monster," Marek continued. "They will say you are the danger." "They already do," the young man answered. "That changes nothing."
Marek nodded slowly.
"Then finish what they began, or it will begin again." When the old man turned back toward the village, his shoulders looked lighter, as if he had finally spoken a truth he had carried too long. That night, the forest watched. Hal drank until his courage drowned his caution. He laughed loudly near the watchfire, mocking shadows, mocking rumors, mocking fear itself. When he stood to relieve himself, the darkness closed in. He never saw the blade. He only felt the moment when fear finally found him. By morning, blood stained the village square. Hal's body lay where everyone could see it.
No symbol.
No message. This time, explanation was unnecessary. Gerdal stared at the body longer than anyone else. He did not speak, because for the first time, fear was no longer useful. It was personal. The village no longer slept. Lanterns burned through the night. Doors remained barred even in daylight. Every sound was questioned, every shadow suspected. Fear had stopped whispering. Now it spoke openly, and everyone heard it. Gerdal felt the change most of all. He stayed indoors, sending others to speak for him. Orders were passed through frightened men with shaking voices. Authority, once effortless, now required effort. Lies needed maintenance. By the third night after Hal's death, Gerdal decided to leave. He packed coin, sealed documents, and a short sword he had never learned to use properly. Before dawn, he slipped from his house, moving toward the old road, telling himself that survival mattered more than pride. The forest did not argue. The young man stepped onto the path ahead of him, visible this time, unmoving. The darkness behind him felt deeper, as if it belonged to him. "You should have left sooner," the young man said. Gerdal's hand trembled on the sword hilt. "I did what was necessary," he said. "This village lives because of me." "It lives," the young man replied, "but others died." Gerdal tried reason, then anger, then pleading. Each failed in turn. "You gave the order," the young man said quietly, "and I carried one like it once." The blade moved once. When it was over, the forest accepted the body without ceremony. Before sunrise, the young man returned to the ravine. He washed the blade in the stream, then joined the two medallion fragments together properly for the first time. Blood filled the old crack, sealing what had been broken. The symbol was whole again, not because it had been restored, but because it had been paid for. He did not wear it. Some things were not meant to be shown again. They found Gerdal's house empty. By the end of the week, someone else took his place. Not because they wanted power, but because emptiness demanded filling. The village rebuilt itself carefully, avoiding the past, choosing silence over questions. Marek lived long enough to see the first snowfall. On one quiet evening, he sat by the road and watched the trees until he did not rise again. The young man did not return. He walked away before winter, carrying nothing but memory and a blade that had done what words could not. The forest closed behind him. Some debts end in blood. Others end in silence. The worst ones never end at all.